Back with you here on a Sunday evening. The Kaufman Corner podcast is live. Remember, if you're catching us via the podcast later in the week, we stream live Sunday nights at 10 o'clock Central Time. The good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, talking Royals baseball. The Royals Hall of Fame ballot is out. People casting their votes. Fans can cast their votes. Some of us in the media can cast our votes. We can all have our opinions. We'll talk about that, coming up here. Who was the toughest cut? Who was the, last person to make it on our list? We'll talk about what the criteria is. We'll break all that down here when it comes to the Royals Hall of Fame, but we're going to begin with which players should the Royals be looking to extend this offseason? That's where we're going to start right here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
This is the Kaufman Corner Podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. Kind of quiet, kind of slow at the winter meetings, although that has kind of become the new norm for the winter meetings. We did get a little bit of a shakeup, right, last week, but not as far as the Royals go. So we continue to be on watch for that. So if they're not making deals, not making trades, Rany, time to talk about who they ought to be locking up. One of the things we always like to talk about here is like maybe what we learned from the exercise as you scoured the Royals roster and looked for a player or players that you thought were worthy of being able to be extended by the Royals. Did you have anything that you really came away with that you learned from this exercise?
I did. I want to say when we last spoke 6 days ago, I said that the Royals would come out of the winter meetings with a different roster than when they went in. Nailed it. So, no, they did nothing, which, I don't think that's for lack of trying. I think that they probably laid the foundations for stuff. There were a number of trades, but I think the free agent market is just moving a little slower than they'd like. So still maintain optimism. They'll make a move here, but it will probably be like Christmas Eve at like 5 p.m. And won't help our deadline very much. So.
Well, if they do it, they'll announce it and have a press conference at 5:14 and making sure that nobody can get on it. That's just the new way that they do things over there when it comes to a PR standpoint. I guess they've won a few ball games and, don't really care. I'm just saying, that's all. No critique there. Nothing, I'm putting out there. But yeah, I do think, did you find that there was a dearth of players to choose from? Like, did you find a number of people that you're like, oh, okay, I want this guy? Was it like hard to narrow it down to one, or was it hard to find one to extend? Or was it a no-brainer?
So to me, what was so striking is that how clearly there's one player on their roster that so clearly towers over the rest in terms of suitability for a long-term extension, both in terms of talent, in terms of service time. Like, there's one guy that really stands out from the pack for me, and I'm curious whether you agree with that, or because normally we agree on these things, but it would be more interesting if you didn't. So, do you want to tell me what you found?
Well, let me say this. I don't think we're going to agree based upon what you're hearing. Let me take a stab at if there's only one guy. Like, I actually didn't have just one guy, right? Okay. But if you only have one guy, then you settled on Cole Ragans.
I did. I think Cole Ragans, he checks off every single box that I look for when I think of what would benefit this organization to sign a young, far from free agency player to an extension that the player might accept and at the same time might strengthen the long-term health of the organization. Like there are a bunch of other guys I would certainly not be averse to signing, but I just feel like either there's a lot of risk with them, or it's not clear exactly what their value is, or they may simply just not have an interest because they're close enough to free agency that there's no point. And from their perspective, you can't entice them to do so. But let me hear what your who are the players that you are thinking might be up there with Cole in terms of a possible extension.
Well, let me just say that I looked at it and I quickly said no pitchers, right? Like and definitely not pitchers that throw hard. I mean, I think, are you embracing the math or not? Right? Because the math is the harder you throw, the more likely you are to get hurt. Jeff Passan cites it all the time. He cited that Paul Skeen should start the All-Star game because we don't know that he'll ever make another one because of how wicked his stuff is. The more wicked your stuff is, the more likely you are to break down. And so, like, I don't think Cole Reagans is a long-term investment. I don't know why you would lock him up. I don't think you need to. And in fact, I think the plan should be that, you better be developing. The one thing that, whatever they got going on right now, they've got to be developing more pitching. I mean, they have to become proficient at developing pitching. And that's one of the things when we get around to, like, what do we want to see at spring training and what has to happen this year, big picture versus like small picture. What has to happen this year for them to contend is going to be one thing. What has to happen this year for the train to be rolling down the track to this team, this organization being a contender year in, year out, there's going to have to be pitching coming through that system. There has to be names that are in the minor leagues, maybe even some that we're not even thinking about, that has to be coming forward. And there is no alternative, right? Like you can't, there's no way to fake it. They have to develop pitching. And I do not think that the way the economics work, I think what they have to do is solidify their position players, probably in the neighborhood of 5 deep, 5 to 6, maybe 7 deep, but 5 or 6 deep, that get those solidified and not all expiring at the same time. They need, a couple of guys that are signed for 4, a couple for 3, a couple, one for 2 and 2 for, 1 year. Like it's got to constantly be rotating off. And whether that's trading guys out, whether that's, looking to extend them, to me, that's the key. And it's one of the reasons why I think the Brett Beatty conversations have really cooled off, by my understanding that there isn't really anything going on right there. It was probably never as hot and heavy as it was made out to be. I think it was slow news days, and you heard the name and there was probably conversations had, but I don't think it was ever like getting close to getting done. My favorite was, well, Juan Soto wears 22. So clearly, Beatty is on the move.
Yeah, he can't possibly change his number. He just has to change franchises. That's how it works.
No, and I mean, how could Soto possibly afford paying a man enough money to get his 22? He's only got $765 million minimum to work with here. But I do think there's interest in Beatty. I think there's interest in a third baseman, and I think that's the direction to go. And listen, if they sign Cole Reagans to an extension, am I going to mind it? No, but how long do you want to sign him for?
Okay, so let's talk about Cole, because you make a very good point, which is if there is a red flag, it is the fact that he's a pitcher, right? And yes, max velocity correlates with specifically Tommy John risk, right? The risk of Tommy John surgery. Now Cole he's not Jacob deGrom, where he's averaging like 99 miles an hour, but also breaking down about every 3 months. He throws hard. He throws for a lefty very hard, but I don't think the injury risk is higher for a lefty who throws 95 than it is for a righty who throws 95, even though the lefty with 95, we would say, has a better fastball. But here's the thing. Even if he gets hurt, it's usually an elbow injury, which takes a guy out for a year. And if anything, when Max Fried just signed an 8-year contract with the New York Yankees, right? And one of the things, my friend Joe Sheehan, which I know his name is a bet noir on here, but he made a very good point about this contract, which is with pitchers, you have to assume over a long enough period of time, almost any good enough pitcher is a risk for Tommy John surgery. But you can almost build that into the life of the contract. So if anything, a long contract, you can assume even if the pitcher misses 1 year, if it's 1 year out of 3, that's a problem. If it's 1 year out of a 6 or 7 or 8 year deal, you're basically amortizing the risk over the entire contract. So even if Cole Reagans, who mind you has already had Tommy John surgery, which failed and had a second one, but usually there's a honeymoon period after a successful Tommy John surgery of maybe about 5 years. So I think he's not at high risk for the next 2 or 3 years, but a long enough contract, it's a possibility. But if you're signing him to a contract with options, which any long-term extension he's going to get at this point in time, the trade-off from Cole's perspective, he's getting guaranteed money up front. What the Royals are getting are options at the back. And one of the things which you see a lot with this particularly young pitcher contract extensions that is new to the world of contracts over the last 5 to 10 years is teams have built in a lot of times a conditional option where if a pitcher has Tommy John surgery during the life of the contract, the team will then get like an additional option at the end for like $1 million, like close to the minimum salary. Essentially, both sides are agreeing that if Tommy John happens, the team will get that year back on the back end. I think that's a very smart way to balance the risk, because Cole Reagans is young enough that even if he signs, let's say a 4-year deal with with, let's say, 2 options on top, like the Royals have him for the next 4 years regardless. But if they're going to sign him to a long-term extension, the whole point of it is to get cheap options at the end so you can keep him for 6, maybe 7 years. Let's say it's 6 years. He'll still be 33 in 6 years, young enough if he's a number 1, number 2 starting pitcher to still sign a very lucrative contract on the free agent market at full market value. So there's incentive for him to do so, get guaranteed money, get him set up for life now, and knowing that even if he ends up having Tommy John and the Royals get an extra year at the end of it or whatever, he'll still be young enough to hit the free agent market before the end of his career. And I just think the value of what he is, a borderline, if not actual number 1 starter, one of the 10 to 12 best starting pitchers in the sport, the opportunity for the Royals to be able to get that guy under contract beyond his free agency right now for even an extra 2 years is enormous. The Royals are not going to be able to afford a guy like that on the free agent market. They're not going to be able to afford Juan Soto, and they're not going to be able to afford, forget Max Fried. We're talking Justin Verlander type, like a legitimate ace going for $35-40 million a year is the starting bid on the free agent market. I honestly think he's that kind of pitcher. He's the best starting pitcher the Royals have had on their team. Probably,
I think, but I like that. That's all great. What a wonderful bio you wrote for Cole Reagans. Spectacular. Doesn't address the issue, right? Like I disagree with nothing that you said. Everything you said is fantastic. How much money do you think it would take? I mean, all this is circumstantial based upon will the player sign,
of course,
right? And I'm going to give you another reason why I would not be going down that road here in a second. But we both agree with that, and I think if you're listening to the Kaufman Corner podcast, it's not intro to baseball for you. You're a pretty smart baseball fan. You at least got a working knowledge of how everything works here. So we're not gonna dumb it down to the nth degree. But I mean, I don't disagree with anything you said. It's all true. The question is, does that make good economic sense for a ball club that can't carry, despite what Joe Sheehan says, cannot just carry whatever payroll they want, cannot just buy their way past a mistake? And what will it do if they lose that big of chunk of the payroll, right? Like, can they survive that? And what if he's done and they're on the hook for 3 or 4 years, right? Like 2 years, 3 years. What does that do to their chances of contending if they're getting zero from him? Is the return worth it? You have control of it. Now, I think the wild card, this is the wild card that's in it. Is Garrett Crochet the new norm? Are guys going to shoot their way out of town? Are they going to go, NFL style? Like, if you don't give me the contract right now, even though you have control, I'm not pitching. I'm not going to show up. That's how it works in the NFL. Guys are under contract. They've got a year or two left. They don't show up. They don't show up for that last year. They don't come to camp. Is that what we're going to get in baseball? Because the trade-off has been that they get guaranteed contracts. And in exchange for getting guaranteed contracts, they show up for all the years, right? And even early on, you're a loyal soldier. You do your thing waiting to get to free agency. But I think Garrett Crochet and his camp were the first ones to realize, especially as pitchers, I don't know that we can just wait through the 6 years or the 6 years plus if teams have done it. And we're going to threaten to like walk, to not pitch. Like if that becomes the new norm, where are you more inclined to? Well, I guess you got to sign him and just live with it, or are you more inclined to say, well, we got to move him? You're inclined to say sign him right now, so it'd be irrelevant. But what if you can't get the amount, and he says, I'm not showing up unless I get a deal? What would you do with him?
I mean,
Garrett Crochet.
Garrett Crochet, to me, that is. I do not think that is the new norm. I think the 2024 Chicago White Sox, 121 losses. That is not the new norm either, right? Like if you're that bad, frankly, like I know Garrett's getting, the narrative is that like he didn't want to pitch and risk injury. I also think from the White Sox perspective, they realize there is nothing they could benefit from putting him on the mound at the second half of last year, because his value to the franchise was as a trade, and the last thing they wanted is for him to get hurt. So I mean, he went out there, and I think he didn't go beyond the fourth inning, like in like the last 2 months of the season. He pitched enough to prove that he was healthy, but the White Sox had no incentive to take any risks with him either. So I think like if that had happened for a team that was even nominally in a pennant race, that would have been scandalous. Right. And it would have been scandalous. It would not have been good for Garrett Crochet's reputation. I don't think, to me, that is not my concern. My concern is simply if you don't sign Cole Reagans and 2 years from now, you're a bad team, do you then say what's best for the organization is what was best when Zach Greinke was 2 years from free agency in 2011 and, trade him away?
I think the devil's in the details, right? What contract can you get him signed to? Are we buying 1 year into free agency and making him somebody had? I think I put it up there that you get some cost certainty on what you're going to have on him, and you buy the extra year. I'm open to that, right? Where you're really not committing to any more, and that, but it really does depend upon what he's going to say. I just think the overall plan of this organization has to be that they can identify, acquire, and develop pitching and become a factory on it. It's the only way to do it. And then to me, you use your money, the money that you're going to spend, you use that on hitting. And you use that to put together a lineup. And again, you stagger the contracts. There has to be a big picture view of what you're doing, and not just let's get all these guys that have them all come up at the same time, right? Like that to me is the critical juncture, right? So I have no argument with your Cole Reagans. Like, what are you thinking in your head? What's the contract you see for Cole Reagans?
So I want to say I agree with what you're saying too. With the focus, that should be on developing pitching and putting the resources to hitting. My argument is basically I don't think Cole Reagans is your typical pitcher that you develop. Like I think a savvy organization also understands when you have a Bobby Witt. Like you do whatever it takes to sign Bobby Witt. You don't do whatever it takes to sign, I don't know, Eric Hosmer or even Vinny Pasquantino or somebody else on the roster. Like I wasn't making this argument.
To Dayton Moore and JJ Picola's credit, they have not signed those guys.
Right. Well,
they took a run at Eric Hosmer and definitely got bailed out.
Right. They certainly did. They got very fortunate there.
They didn't get it done. He was not willing to go and be the top dog or close to the top dog on the market value. Just there. But what's the contract look like to Reagans in your head?
So I went. The things I do for our listeners. I spent a long time researching, trying to find someone that fits the Cole Reagans profile, a starting pitcher as opposed to a position player who has 2+ years of service time, right? So still 4 years away from free agency, that was signed to a long-term contract extension by his organization. And I will say, I was surprised by how hard it was to find examples. I was able to, but and it's quite possible I've missed some more recent ones, but literally the most recent example I could find was 2011, 13, almost 14 years ago. Clay Buchholz, the young starter for the
Red
Sox. Well, that one didn't work great, But the one before, 2 years earlier, they had signed this, and this one I think is the most is a much more interesting comparison. John Lester, who was 2+ years of service time, and had just come off an exceptional season in 2008 for the Red Sox, 210 innings, a 144 ERA plus, left-hander, like very comparable. He was only 24 years old. Cole was 26. So he's probably a better pitcher at that moment than Cole is today, but very, very comparable. He signed, I believe it was a 5-year deal. Yeah, 5-year extension that bought out 1 year of free agency. He was 4 years away from free agency. He got a 5-year deal with a team option. Clay Buchholz signed a 4-year deal with 2 club options. And then before that, Fausto Carmona, you may remember him with the Indians. He had it was his first full season, so he was only 1+ years of free of service time. They signed him to, I believe,
Buchholz, Carmona, and who was the third one?
John Lester.
And John Lester.
But Lester is the one most comparable, the only lefty in the group, probably the best of the group.
Yeah, and the one that, like, we're just going to brush aside the 2 that didn't really work.
Well, I mean, the question is, how badly did they not work? Because in both cases, they didn't get a ton of money. The one who got the most money, Buchholz was actually pretty good for a while. They both him and John Lester got $30 million guaranteed. Lester then had it was a 5 years, $30 million contract with a $13 million team option. Now this is 13, 14 years ago, so I think you could safely double that. But I will also say Lester was already arbitration eligible. He was a Super 2. Cole Reagans is not a Super 2. So just that fact that while they have their same number of years until free agency, they do not have the same number of arbitration years. So you can actually knock that down a little bit, because the fact is, if Cole does not sign a long-term contract, the Royals can still pay him under $1 million this year. But I would say something along the lines of 4 years and $50 to $60 million guaranteed, and then club options probably in the $20 to $25 million range. Let's say 2 options, and then you throw in like a Tommy John Ryder in case he gets hurt. You're talking about a guaranteed outlay of maybe no more than $60 million. 15, look, if you don't, it's not like if you don't sign him, you're going to be able to, be cheap with him for a long time. You'll save a lot of money in 2025, but a year from now, if Cole has a season anything close to what he just did, where he was, got Cy Young votes, etc., his salary is going to jump very quickly, right? Even in his first year in arbitration, he's probably going to make $7 to $8 million. He'll almost certainly be in the 8 figures 2 years from now. So, even if you're guaranteeing him, let's say, an average of $15 million a year, yeah, you're paying a little bit more upfront, although you can, of course, backload the contract if you want. But the potential to get him for 10, 15, 20 million under market value in 2029, when he would otherwise be a free agent, in 2030, I think that there's the numbers. The team and the player are going to work those out, and obviously if they can't come to an agreement, it won't work out. But I just feel like there is a framework here where the player gets paid now. He doesn't have to worry about his arm going kablooey and completely losing it. He's guaranteed, to be generational wealth no matter what. But from the Royals' perspective, it's a risk that's manageable, and the upside for them in 4 years is substantial. That's why I think that this could work. But yeah, sure, if they can agree on the money, if he wants, 80 or 90 million guaranteed, maybe it doesn't work out. But I just feel like this is a player the Royals can go the extra mile for. Not Bobby Witt level, but you can develop all the pitchers in the world. I didn't advocate this for Brady Singer. I'm not advocating it for Alec Marsh or Chris Bubich, right? Cole Reagans, to me, is the foundation of what could be a really good rotation for years to come.
All right, let's I'll come back. I'll give you my thoughts, my process of how I arrived where I did. First, we'll tell you about our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear in KC since 1994. Don't risk accidents and liability in your parking lot. Get your lot restriped today. A brightly striped lot will cut down on accidents and keep your lot as safe as possible. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. All right, the process for me, Randy, by the way, I got to ask, because this is the first time, is there something symbolic about the empty chair to your right? Because like I've never seen. Is that like you don't
Oh.
expect anyone to get signed? Is that like a symbolism there?
No, that was my one of my daughters was sitting in that chair about 30 minutes ago going over her homework with me.
Okay.
And I forgot to move it out of screen. So
All right. Good to know.
I wish I had a better story for you.
Yeah, that'd be great because I was like, oh, this signifies the Royals' inability to. All right, so let me say this. I went through the process and I'm like, I just think that pitching has to become a machine and they have to be dealing pitching for more players. And I think everybody needs pitching and you can get a great haul. We've had a couple people mention, well, if the worst case scenario is you get the Zach Greinke deal coming on the back end. That's not the worst case scenario. Let me tell you that's absolutely not the worst case scenario to get a starting shortstop, a reliever, a frontline starting pitcher in baseball, and an MVP candidate, not MVP, but an MVP candidate center fielder. That is not the worst case scenario. So please, that was one of the maybe best case scenarios of how trading a Cy Young Award winner can work out for you. So let's be clear about what that was. That was not like, well, at least he salvaged this. Dayton Moore did great on that. Let's go ahead and feel free to give credit where credit is due. And that was a tremendous trade by Dayton Moore.
Second best in Royals history. So yeah, don't expect that every time.
Yeah. So let's be honest with ourselves about that. But so I work my way through the pitching, and I'm just like, I'm okay with the Michael Wacha deal, especially now as the market has really, I think, increased. It looks like a really smart deal. Looks like JJ Picollo has beaten the market each of the last 2 years with what he's done. And I think that's great. That's good to see. And again, let me stress, I have no problem if they end up signing Cole Reagans. If that's the approach they go, it just isn't necessarily the approach I would take. I'll cross my fingers. I'll take a deep breath. I hope it all works out. And I hope it's a sign that there's a lot more money there as the team continues to develop players, that they will keep more money. They will have more money to keep their own players. That being said, so I work my way through the position players. I think that they would really like to give Vinny Pasquantino the money, but I think getting hurt at the end takes that away. He's not going to be that young when he gets into the free agent years. So to me, Vinny Pasquantino is a guy that you're probably looking to move before he gets out of club control. I think he's proven that I think the proof is, as much as I like Vinny Pasquantino, he's probably not going to stay healthy for various reasons. One, he's unathletic and doesn't get out of the way of runners on the first base side. I mean, that's all those little things are part of the equation. I think that was the guy you wanted to hand the other contract to. Came and went, in my opinion. Vinny Pasquantino plays it out, and we listen to offers along the way. I think Michael Massey's a guy that had he been able to stay healthy, I think maybe top of the list because he's more cost effective. I think Vinny Pasquantino ran the risk of being expensive if he was healthy and productive. And he was kind of doing that thing where he was pretty productive, but the overall, some of the peripheral numbers weren't great, but it was like you maybe were going to find a sweet spot where you could get it done. And then, of course, he got hurt. Michael Massey comes out of the gates getting hurt, then gets hurt again later. I don't think you can go there, and we don't even know where we're going to play him. Right? If we're JJ Picollo in the front office, we're still trying to figure that out. He may get traded before we get to spring training because of the Jonathan India. So I'm open to that if I know where I'm going to play. If it's just lip service we're getting and they feel very comfortable that he can play left field, I'm open to getting a deal done because I think it's going to be a very team friendly. If we believe in him, we've got to believe that there's more there with the bat and we know where he's going to play. Maybe it's third base, what have you. I'm open to that. The only guy, and this is going to disappoint you, Freddie Fermin. I'm signing Freddie Fermin and getting, if it's just one guy, I know it's not sexy. I know it's not what anyone wants to hear. I look at Kyle Isbell, but I think center fielders lose their legs like running backs lose their legs, right? He's going to be a fine defensive outfielder, but he's going to lose the jumps. And when he loses what jumps he does have, then he's going to be a really good defensive corner outfielder that really can't hit. And so I'm not tying up a bunch of years. And Kyle Isbell, we better be able to develop better than Kyle Isbell. So I'm not going there. That leaves us with Freddie Fermin. And I'm okay with locking him in because whether it's you lock him in to make him more valuable to trade, as somebody mentioned with that Cole Reagans could be that you make him more valuable by getting him locked in. If you're just trading him as a great defensive catcher that shows some hit tools, fine. With cost certainty, that's got value on the market. Or if you get him locked up because you got a great defensive catcher with some hit tools, that's got cost certainty at a good price, and you move some of the prospects before somebody finds out that they're not that good, I'm fine with that too. It's boring. I went through the whole process. I wanted to give you better. I wanted sexy. I wanted Cole Reagans. I wanted to tell you that Michael Massey's going to explode and become Jeff Kent very soon. I can't do it. It's not sexy. There isn't a guy right now. They don't have to go spend money just to spend money, just to show that they will do it. They signed the right guy in Bobby Witt Jr. There is no, to me, obvious choice to give money to right now.
I mean, that part I agree with. On the position player side, I don't think there's anybody who's a slam dunk, and that's unfortunate in the sense that you would love to, like, the most valuable commodity a franchise can have is a young, cost-controlled, elite position player, right? And they don't have somebody that checks all those boxes except for Bobby Witt, and they've got that contract done, and great. Um, I agree with you. Like bringing up Vinny and Michael Massey, those to me were the two obvious guys, and there are some very easy comparisons I can make with Cole Reagans in the sense that all three guys are 27 years old, or will be. I think Michael turns 27 in March. Cole returned 27 earlier this week, and Vinny in October. All three have 2+ years of service time. I don't think any of them will be arbitration eligible this year. And they all are 4 years away from free agency. So they're exactly in the same position in terms of age and service time. The reason I did not bring them up, I don't think they're as obvious, is not, it's not a matter of even their talent, or even in Vinny's case, his injury thing. Yes, he did get hurt at the end of the year, but it was a broken bone. That's to me the least concerning kind of injury. And he came back from the injury even faster than expected. That's a great sign. My concern, and the reason why I didn't bring him up, even though like a year ago he was second on my list, I think behind Bobby Witt for a contract extension, is I just think it's difficult for the team and the player to necessarily agree on what the player is worth if you don't know exactly what the player is yet. And my concern with Vinny, he was generally healthy. His shoulder was not an issue to the best of my knowledge all season long. Yeah, he got hurt at the very end, but like we saw what he did. The problem is he hit well, but not quite as well as we're hoping based on how he performed as a rookie. And the question is this just him coming back from a significant injury? And he was very streaky. He was terrible to start the year. Then he was as hot as anybody in baseball. Then he was very cold again. So I think it would just be difficult for both sides to agree on what he is, because if he is what he was this year and no better, he's a good first baseman. I don't know if you remember Mitch Moreland with the Red Sox, like a consistently slightly above average hitter at the position. You can go to the playoffs with a guy like that. Obviously the Royals did. But that's not a star. That's not somebody you give a long-term deal to. To me, that's his baseline, right? I still think that he could be a much better hitter, closer to what he was as a rookie when he was, an elite hitting first baseman. If you can get him to sign a deal that prices him as more of the Mitch Moreland type, I would do that. Absolutely. Because I think there's no downside, because the downside is he's fairly paid and the upside is you're getting a bargain. But I don't think he would sign that. So I just feel like finding a number that both sides can agree to will be difficult with Vinny. And for Michael, like you pointed out, I mean, he's back. He was on the injured list twice with a back injury. I don't think we know, can he stay healthy for 162 games? Is he a second baseman, a third baseman, a left fielder? Right? We don't know. And with them still being 4 years away from free agency, I just don't see there's no urgency. I think we can wait one more year. Again, they're not even arbitration eligible. So they're not going to make a ton of money this year. They'll still be amenable to a potential long-term extension next year. And you'll have another year of data to know to know if they're worth it or not. And then finally, Freddie Fermin, the reason I don't bring him up is he's going to be 30 in May. And he's 5 years away from free agency. I think he's got 1+ year of service time. So if you don't sign him to a long-term deal, he's not going to be a free agent until he's 35 years old. And a 35-year-old catcher, like the odds that Freddie Fermin is, like, you're going to regret not having him under contract for an extra year when he's 35. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like there's much downside to not signing him. I think he still has value on the trade market just for who he is, because whoever gets him has him for 5 years. So that's why I'm not sure I see that one.
Let me be clear. Think Salvi's first contract, right? The one where everybody went, oh, I mean, for him, there is, like, because catcher hit tools fall apart. Like they become defense only guys. And so I think it'd be incredibly cost effective. Let me tell you that my real answer, we said you have to have one. My real answer is no one. I don't think there's anybody they got to be hot to trot. That's my real answer. But that's why I think Freddie, for me, what it would take would be low. And I think, it has to be completely, pain free for the Royals to do it. So I think it's a great exercise, and I think it also speaks to there's no one on the farm system that we're looking at. We're like, hey, you want to go in and sign him before what's his name with the Brewers?
Jackson Chourio,
yeah, Jackson Chourio, who hadn't even played. You want to make sure there's no one like that for the Royals.
Well, they don't have a top 10 prospect, right? I mean, Jack Caglione, but again, even as good a prospect as he is, the variance for him is huge, right? This isn't a guy where, he's going to be a good player. He just has to make it to the majors. Caglione could hit 500 home runs in the major leagues. He could hit 5. We have no idea. And
right,
putting down long term on that just seems foolish. So, I mean, I basically agree with you. I mean, the only disagreement is Cole Reagan's worth the risk as a pitcher. I think he's so good that he is worth the risk. You have your reservations, and I think again the number is what matters. If I'm sure there's a contract out there, you would be like, that's a great deal, and there's a contract out there that I'd be like, whoa, that's too much risk. So I hope they can come to an agreement that makes everybody happy. I think that would make me happy. They did it with Bobby Witt. They only have one guy they can focus on this winter, so I really do hope that behind the scenes they're talking about that.
If you own or manage a business, your parking lot can be a risk. If you've got some small potholes this time of year, they can become large potholes. Let our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete solve any and all your parking lot problems. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warning. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. All right, Randy, the Hall of Fame votes are out. I think they're due a little bit after January. We're going to get into the holidays. And I'm very honored to get a vote with the,
and I'm very jealous to not have one. So congratulations to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I can't remember what the first year was that I had a vote, but I've had it for a little while now. And I take it very serious. And I'll tell you, here's the list. I shot it up there if you're catching us via the podcast. If you're on the stream tonight, we got a lot of folks, a lot of great listeners here that are participating. I put the list out here, but here it is for everybody on the podcast. Carlos Beltran, Billy Butler, Johnny Damon, Wade Davis, Gerard Dyson, Alex Gordon, Kelvin Herrera, Joaquin Soria, Yordano Ventura. These are the names of all the players that are eligible. Let me be clear. You're not nominated by somebody. You simply played 3 years in a Royals uniform. There are minimums. I think it's 1,500 at-bats minimum and 300 innings minimum. And you have to have been done playing the game of baseball for 3 years.
Correct.
Right? If you meet all of those criteria, you are automatically put up on the ballot. You have to receive 75% of the vote. There are some folks that are back. I'll tell you, this is the 3rd try for Carlos Beltran. He was at 66% his first year, 57% his last year. They do it in odd years, every other year that it happens. 3rd appearance for Billy Butler, 56% the first year, 50% the second time. This is number 5 for Johnny Damon. He's never really even sniffed it. 25, 36, 25, 18%.
And I should point out, if you get 10% of the vote, you stay on the ballot.
Yes, you have to have 10% stay on the ballot.
If you get 10%, then you're off. But as long as you get 10%, you can stay on.
Wade Davis's first ballot, Gerard Dyson's first ballot, Alex Gordon's first ballot, Kelvin Herrera's first ballot, Joaquin Soria's first ballot, and Yordano Ventura's 4th ballot. He's received 14, 22, and 19% of the votes. These are the people that are up there to be voted on. Let's start with what was your first reaction. And by the way, the Royals, Kurt Nelson, who runs their Hall of Fame, is the team historian. I call him the team historian. I don't know what his title is. I don't think he's a director, a vice president, or I don't know what the hell he is, what his title is, but he's Mr. Knowledge when it comes to the Royals and their history, and does a fantastic job for them, and does a fantastic job, I'll tell you, for us, giving us a lot of great information. Like, here it is. You can dig even deeper if you want, but he gives us a lot of great information to work from, including the backgrounds and the numbers of all the players that have come before, where everybody ranks who's currently playing, who's on this list to be voted on, who has already been voted in. He does a great job of organizing it to make it very easy, to do your homework, right? And so, what was your first reaction when you look at it? What jumped at you when you saw the assignment?
I mean, my first reaction, the dominant reaction I had is simply that we are finally starting to get into an era where worthy players are getting onto the ballot again, right? Because there's always there's a delay of many years between like a guy's playing career with the Royals and when he becomes eligible. And there was an extremely fallow period in Royals history, right? Which in the 90s and 2000s, which led to an extremely fallow period on their Hall of Fame ballot, right? Like, to give you an example, Mark Gubazal was inducted in 2006, right? Mm-hmm. Here are the list of players. So there Art Stewart, George Toma, Ned Yost have been elected, but these were non-playing personnel.
Right.
Since 2006, the following players, according to the Royals website, their Hall of Fame: Kevin Napier in 2011, and was long overdue. He should have been in sooner, but great, Kevin Napier is in.
I think he played and played and played and played.
He did. I guess his last year was 2004. I don't know when. I think he would have been eligible sooner, but I think they've also changed the eligibility rules. And
yeah, they have. They've tweaked.
So that might have been why. So Mike Sweeney in 2015, and then last year Bo Jackson. Like in 18,
Bo Jackson on Special Veterans.
Right. It was kind of
like, hey, you guys missed this. You want to try this again?
All right.
Was where it was. By the way, I will note that I voted no on Bo Jackson.
Right. We had that discussion last year.
I have no problem with him getting in, but I voted no.
And I think, based on his playing career, he didn't deserve his was very much he was a very special case. But the point is, two players were selected by the standard voting process, were elected into the Royals Hall of Fame in the last 18 years. Like, that's sad, but it's hard to argue that they've missed somebody. Now we can talk about the guys on this year's ballot, but I think we're starting to see guys who have a legitimate opportunity to make the Hall of Fame, not just because of how they played, but also because of the team that they were on. Like, there's just, the reality is that you play for a two-time pennant winner, you play for a world champion, it's going to give you a little bit of a halo. It's going to give you a little bit of a tailwind when it comes to the vote. And I do think, there's obviously, Alex Gordon, I think, is going in, right? We can talk about some of the other ones, but he's going in this year. But even guys who might not get elected this year, there are multiple guys on this ballot that I think will get in at some point.
Okay. Let's start with it. By the way, I'm a huge Bo Jackson fan. I may or may not possess a couple of autographed Bo Jackson jerseys, maybe even a Bo Jackson bat. But I do my job. When interested in this, I do it the way it should be. It's the Hall of Fame. It's greatness. It's not the Hall of Really Good. And there's just not quite a big enough body of work for Bo as to why he didn't get in. Because I had a couple of people like, well, you didn't vote for Bo. What are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, I know that became the popular thing. Like, because I think there's criteria that you need to get. Who was there anybody out of these? What is it? 9 guys? Or is it 8 guys? I forget what it is.
I believe 9. I have 9
players. Okay. Is there anybody that was like, you study them, you look at all of them, but is there anybody very quickly you went, no? That was the easiest thing, was to eliminate no.
Honestly, I mean, I at least consider all of them. I will say, I mean, Gerard Dyson comes across as, like, analytically, like, you can make a case, but it would be very hard for me to put a guy into a Hall of Fame who was literally never an everyday starting player for the team. Like, he was maybe the best 4th outfielder the Royals have ever had, but he was never a 3rd outfielder. He never started all the time.
Part of the reason analytically he's a darling is because he didn't play all the time. He played when he had an opportunity.
Probably helped. And also because his defensive numbers were just otherworldly. I mean, that's a big part of it. But the point is, even the analytics would not make the case that he deserves to belong. He has a better case than you'd think, but yeah, I looked at that. I'm like, I cannot make an argument for Gerard Dyson on the World Hall of Fame.
Gerard Dyson was very quickly dispatched. That was, nothing against him, but that was very easy to get through. He was very quickly dispatched. Anybody else
that I got rid of quickly? I mean, look, I understand the emotional reaction for Yordano Ventura being on the ballot, and he was a good starting pitcher for 3 seasons. And if he had been a good starting pitcher for 5 seasons, I think we could have that argument. But in terms of what he is, his performance, I can't justify it. And while his passing was tragic, if he had passed away the way Roberto Clemente passed away, or the way Joe Delaney passed away, to bring up a local connection, right, that'd be one thing. He died tragically, but it wasn't heroically. And I think to put him in would imply something heroic about the circumstances of his career ending. And I just feel like that would be a very emotional decision. I can't make that.
I echo everything you said, but he was the third guy eliminated by me. I disagree with nothing, but he was third one out and was the third of 3 that were pretty quick to be like, no. Like when you see where he ranks and all the different things, he's a long way down from a lot of guys. And there are guys that I voted no on, and this may be one where, at some point I'm going to be an old fart and they're going to cycle me off this, and it'll be, somebody else's will have a fresh look at it. And that's how Hall of Fame should be. Right. And I really do think it's the kind of thing that, like I don't like when people, and one thing that this Hall of Fame has been kind of unique in how it is, you know that nobody has ever made the Royals Hall of Fame that didn't make it on their first ballot.
Interesting.
No one has ever, it doesn't work like the Major League Baseball where like, oh, I'm not putting him in on the first ballot. You either get in on the first ballot or you don't get in.
Well, like the vote totals you mentioned were very flat. Like you think about when the writers vote for the Major League Hall of Fame, it's shocking if your vote total doesn't go up every year. But you know what? To be perfectly honest, that's never made sense to me. The number of people like, well, this guy doesn't deserve to make it until he's on the ballot for the 4th time. Like that's the only explanation you can come up with for why a guy's percentages go up year after year after year is people are deciding after they've been on the ballot for years, now he deserves to go in. Why? He either deserves it or doesn't. So if anything, I think the Royals voting, the history of their voting is more sensible. But I do think there's at least one guy on this ballot that should have been in before, and I think, well, I hope we'll make it again finally this time.
Yeah. All right. So there was no one else for you, those two?
So
Kelvin Herrera was the second guy I eliminated.
Okay.
That was pretty quick.
You know what? I actually can make a case for him. So I'm on the fence there. But what I want to say real quick is before we talk about who should be in, who should be out, I like that, you know me, I like to take a step back and look at the big picture. Before we talk about should player X be a Royals Hall of Famer, I just want to talk about what is the standard for a Royals Hall of Famer. All right. And there isn't an official standard. There's nothing on the ballot that says, you should vote for a player to be in the Hall of Fame if you believe he is one of the 20 best players in Royals history or whatever. There's nothing like that. So for me, the standard for should a guy be elected to the Royals Hall of Fame is what is the standard for the current guys in the Royals Hall of Fame. And according to my records here, there are 19 players. So not counting, managers, et cetera, GMs, 19 players in the Royals Hall of Fame. I may have missed one, but those are the 19 I have. And what's really interesting, I just ranked them by wins above replacement, which, and again, I'm not saying that should be the end all or be all at all. What I found interesting, though, given that pretty much all of these guys were inducted before we even had wins above replacement, is how, with just a couple of exceptions, you can use wins above replacement as a really useful rule of thumb for who deserves to be in and who deserves to be out. Of the 19 guys in the Royals Hall of Fame, 16 of them have at least 18 and a half wins above replacement as a Royal. It is not their career, but their career wins above replacement as a Royal is at least 18 and a half. There is only one eligible player that's not on the ballot now. That's not already, being considered. with more than 18.5 wins above replacement who is not in the Royals Hall of Fame. Do you want to guess who that is?
Who has more than
18.5. Who is the best player in Royals history not in the Royals Hall of Fame who is not either not eligible yet, or like Salvi is obviously not eligible, or is currently on this ballot?
That is not in. Would that be one Dan Duffy?
No.
Zach Greinke?
No, those guys are not eligible yet.
Oh, that are eligible.
Yeah, that are eligible. Yeah, Greinke and Duffy are good. Very good guess. He's second, and he is the most valuable hitter. He had 18.1. That's why I say 18.5 is the dividing line. He's the best Royals hitter not in. It's Charlie Leibrandt.
Okay.
Charlie Leibrandt at 22.8. And like we just mentioned how Bo Jackson got in a kind of a special veterans ballot. If there is one player, if they ever have a veterans ballot again or whatever, that I think has been overlooked for long enough that probably should go in, it would be Charlie Leibrandt. Okay. So just an interesting historical tidbit. But the point is, aside from him, everybody above that threshold is in. And the only guys who are not who made it who are below that, Bo Jackson is one, and we've discussed him already. Steve Busby only had 16 wins above replacement, but he's in not just because he was so dominant, but because obviously the injury that kind of wrecked his career. And then the final one, who's to me clearly the most I don't say missed ineligible player, but the one player did not meet the standards, is Cookie Rojas, who was a fan favorite, was inducted. He was in the second class in 1987. And played in an era where if you hit 280 as a second baseman and played good defense, like people thought you were like a superhero.
And he stole bases, and that was much more hyped.
Exactly. It was from analytics is not going to look at that guy like that favorably, but I get why he was in, and he was like one of the Royals' first like stars. He was like I think a 4-time All-Star. So I kind of get it, but no process is going to be perfect. But it's just interesting to note. But my point is that's kind of the standard. Is that I can use that standard. And so based on that, two of the guys on this ballot are clearly in. And then one guy, the one guy is actually borderline, is Johnny Damon, but I think he's not his first time on the ballot. And I think he's close enough that if the circumstances of his career were better, I would support it. And I think he would already be in, but like the way he left town, the fact that he never played for a good Royals team, like there are reasons why he's not in, and
which were all clearly his fault.
Right, and it's not
his fault that the team was no good.
That wasn't his fault, but I think the bitter taste in the mouth of the fans, the way he left, I get why he's not in, and I'm not clamoring for him to be a member of the Royals.
Well, I am.
Interesting. Okay.
Absolutely. He absolutely belongs in. And I think he belongs in as a lesson to the organization as to the only reason it doesn't walk right in is because of the incompetence of the organization. And the fact that Johnny Damon and his representative, and I know Scott Boras is the great villain, but are willing to point out what was absolute incompetence of ownership at that time should not be held against him. Everything Johnny Damon and his representation said exactly what every fan said. If anything, it strengthens his cause, and it's one of the reasons why I want him in. It's one of the reasons why I have voted for him every time, and I will continue to vote for him every time, because he was tremendous. When he played for the Kansas City Royals, he had a season where he led the league in runs with 136. He had 3 seasons where he scored 100 runs. He led the league in stolen bases with 46. He had an on-base percentage with the Kansas City Royals of 351. Right, slug 438, a 789 OPS. He was a tremendous player. The problem was he played center field and he played left field and he went and got the ball. I mean, and Johnny Damon would have had better stats if they put better players around him. When he did, I remember joking around in the dugout with, hey Johnny, how many steals? Are you aware where you are in the stolen base crown that year? He's like, I don't know. I think I'm 1 or 2 ahead or something like that. He's like, well, I'd be 20 ahead if Ray Sanchez had quit swinging the bat every time, right? And we all went, ha, ha, ha. But it was reality. Ray Sanchez batted second behind him, and I don't know how many times he fouled off obvious steals by Johnny Damon because he couldn't take a pitch of any kind, right? And so I will tell you that Johnny Damon belongs in, and the media in this town should put him in as a reminder to the ownership and the organization that there's a right way and a wrong way to build a team. And there was no reason for him to be sent packing, right? None. He should have been signed. In the modern days, we just talked about who should you sign. Think about where we would have been back in those days. We'd have been like, you're signing this guy. He is exactly what they want to find in this offseason. And they had him, and they made it a toxic environment and ended up walking him right out of town. I like Johnny Damon should be in as a lesson.
Right. You don't have to convince me of the organization.
But I think too much where I get fired up is when you mention, well, he didn't play on winning teams, not because of his doing, because of the incompetence around him.
100%. I owe my career on Kansas City radio to the incompetence of the Royals in those years. That's how I got my start here in the first place. Yes, I agree with you on all of those things. And I think if he had, look, I don't think he would be a bad choice to get in. I just don't feel like a quarter century later that, like, everything you're saying is true. That was a different, owner, and I'm not even sure technically I'm not sure David Glass even owned the team during that time. Different, GM, different, I think the organization has learned the lessons that you're talking about. If you want to put him in as a symbol of
I put him in because I think he belongs. I think he belongs as a guy who consistently got on base, stole bases, played solid defense. I mean, I know what the metrics are around him, but I watched the guy play, and he would run down balls. I mean, Johnny
He was
Damon,
a good defender. His arm sucked, but I think his range made up for it.
His range was great. He was a good guy in the clubhouse. He was a good guy. I mean, I watched the interaction, the way things worked, and there's a reason why he went on to win championships.
I was going to say, he won. He was one of the idiots in Boston, right? That won the first World Series in 86 years.
Johnny Damon should be he will never be in this Hall of Fame, but he should be, and I will vote for him every year.
I think it's
one of my 5 that I voted yes on.
Even if it's a protest vote, I think it's completely valid. The Mike issue from his performance standpoint is simply he played at a time where offense was, the ball was juiced. The league averages were very high back then.
This is on Damon, or this is on?
Well, I'm saying Damon. I'm just saying his numbers. I take a little bit of air out of his numbers because offense was so high throughout the sport, and not just that, but that was he played in a time where Kauffman Stadium had moved the fences in, and so the stadium was actually one of the best hitters parks in the sport, and the sport, like, the league batting average was like 270 those years, not 240 like it is now.
So we're going to run out of time here. So my 5: Johnny Damon, Carlos Beltran, Alex Gordon, Wade Davis, Joakim Soria.
I'm very similar. So to me, Gordon. Okay, we
don't even need to discuss.
Beltran to me is, I don't know why he's not in yet. I really feel like
incompetence.
I was going to say, if you want to send, to me, that's the message to send, because Damon may not have been perfect, but Beltran did everything right. Like, he was a better player. He did everything right on the field. But I mean, he even agreed to sign a long-term extension, and then David Glass basically tried to shiv him in the back. Dan Glass started to shiv him in the back.
See if he'll take $1 million less.
Yeah. So, but he was also a better player. I mean, we just talked about wins. He had 24.8. He's well above the threshold. Not that should matter. He was, before Bobby Witt, the most complete ball player I think I had ever seen in a Royals uniform. He was, and like, they didn't make the playoffs, but that 2003 run doesn't happen without him. And I mean, he took a team that really had no business not losing 95 games and kept them in.
Don't you agree? He is the second strongest candidate on this list. I cannot
easily.
It boggles my mind. I do not understand. I cannot comprehend how he is not walking.
I'm shocked that he has not been yet. And like I said, that's to me, that's if there's one takeaway from me and you talking about this, it's like, if you're a fan and you have, the fans as a combined vote, they get I think 3 votes on the overall ballot out of however many are cast from the various media members and members of the Royals Hall of Fame. So the fans have some input.
Yeah,
please vote for Carlos. Like, there's absolutely makes no sense Carlos Beltran's not in. To me, those two are no brainers. Joakim Soria, 100% agree. He was one of the 2 or 3 best relievers in baseball for 4 years. He was a good reliever for another 3 years with the Royals, both before and after he came back. And before Joakim Soria, the Royals had the worst bullpen in Major League history for a decade. and he shows up in 2007. And I mean, that's why I thought Dayton Moore could walk on water in the early years, because like he found this guy in the Rule 5 draft that was a better reliever than anything the Royals had since Jeff Montgomery. He was phenomenal, and I think very underrated because he wasn't around for the pennant winning years. But I love to see Joakim Soria, a gentleman, a good guy, just everything. I love Joakim Soria, not rational about him. I think Wade Davis, even like, again, by wins above replacement, no, not close. By impact on a team, like I don't know how much wins above replacement does not include playoff numbers. So Wade Davis has to go in.
To me, there are two ways you go in. One, the massive long haul accumulation of quality play, and then the sheer brilliant blazing dominance of a short period of time. Like I think it's asinine that Dale Murphy is not in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. He was the best player in baseball for about 3 or 4 years. He was back-to-back MVPs, something that's only been done like 13 or 14 times in the history of the game. Like that's an example of a guy that I think should be, and still had like 397 home runs. And the overall numbers are good, but for a period of time, he was the best player in baseball. Wade Davis was the best closer in baseball. And Wade Davis, to me, was really the first guy that was just like, lights out, I'm striking everybody out. Like he kind of set the new tone. Mariano Rivera had kind of guys were kind of going down the road. Billy Wagner, if somebody wanted to jump at me and say Billy Wagner was like that, I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to argue with you. But, relievers were kind of trying to be Mariano Rivera. Let me find the thing that I can create the longevity. I want to be Trevor Hoffman, Mariano Rivera, more Jeff Montgomery type longevity. And Wade Davis went, I'm blowing everybody away. And his dominance was ungodly. I mean, it was ridiculous. For a brief moment in time, he was the best weapon out of a bullpen in baseball, bar none. And
well, I mean, you say
critical to their success.
You say everybody wanted to be Mariano Rivera. He kind of, for those three, he out Mariano Rivera in the sense that what he was best at, he threw between 2014 and 2016. So the 3 years he was in the bullpen. You want to throw in his 1 month in 2013 and also throw in his playoff numbers. Put it all together, 200 and I want to say 16 innings. I don't have the exact numbers of RP. 216 innings. He allowed 3 home runs. Do you know how ridiculous that is? And one of those, one of those was in a 10-3 game where the Royals were about to clinch the AL Central in 2015. They brought him out in the ninth inning with like a 7-run lead. And he was just throwing strikes down the middle, just, to be on the mound for them when they clinched the division, and he gave up a solo home run. Yip-de-doo. Like, you could not square up his fastball. That, when you talk about Mariano Rivera, that is what Wade Davis was for 3 years. And he's, again, a guy where maybe if the Royals don't make the playoffs, we're not having this discussion. Like, as dominant as he was, it was a very short period of time. But you cannot just ignore what he did in the postseason. In 2 postseasons in a row, he was essentially perfect. He gave up 2 runs, 1 earned in 25 innings in the postseason.
And I think both of them were like irrelevant moments where
I think he
was throwing get me over stuff because he didn't need to get him
Well,
out.
there was one that was the game that Madison Bumgarner shut the Royals out in Game 5. The Royals was like 5-0. He gave up like a run or 2 in like the 8th inning. They were losing that game no matter what. But like I don't think there's ever the Royals never lost a game. They were tied or winning after 6 innings. So clearly none of the runs he gave up mattered. So yes, I would put him in. The difference with you is I actually think if I'm voting for Wade Davis, I kind of think I have to vote for Kelvin Herrera as well. I actually think that
I think there was.
I just feel like he was better. He was.
You have Herrera instead of Damon. That's your 5th guy.
Basically, yes, that's my 5th guy. So, and basically, he wasn't as good, but he was a Royal for longer. He was consistent for longer. And he was also a very integral part of that bullpen. So it is a bit of a fetish pick for me. It's a bit of, idiosyncratic, but I would put Kelvin Herrera in too.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from. I vehemently object because he was.
What will you do with Greg Holland when he's on the ballot next time?
I will review it. I'll worry about that when he gets there. I just feel like he's kind of in the middle. One of my frustrations with the Hall of Fame, and I go nuts at the friends that I have that are on the Pro Football Hall of Fame one, is they have this where they're already thinking down the road where they're going to get guys so they can slot. This guy will go in here. And like Will Shields is a first ballot Hall of Famer. That's asinine. Randall McDaniel was a first ballot Hall of Famer. But they didn't go in. Derek Thomas is a first ballot Hall of Famer. They didn't go in because they're slotting. Well, I can't put him in now because I got to get this guy in because it's his last year of eligibility. And this guy's got to come in the next 2 years. And they slot these things because they're trying to get everybody they want in. And not just voting for the best guys. Look, if you're not, like in this case, one of the top 5 guys, right? It doesn't really work that way with the Royals because there aren't enough good candidates to get in. Really, I think they should cut the number down to 3 each year, right? And then you would have the impetus to, I'm going to vote for the 3 guys I think deserve it the most. And then I would have to weed out. Am I going to weed out Johnny Damon? Am I going to weed out? This is very easy for me. Like,
to me, the football one, the difference is that it's exactly 6 guys, right? Like there's a quota essentially. So like it's a zero-sum game because if player
no, I don't think that's the case. I don't think you have to put them all in. They just do every year.
Okay. Well, I think they feel like there's more people. We had this problem with the Major League Hall of Fame like 10 years ago when because of all the PED stuff, because there were a lot of players who were still on the ballot, like there were 12 or 13 or 14 guys I would have voted, most analysts would have voted for, but you were limited to 10. And so you had to make these difficult decisions. I think the problem is when you artificially limit, then you force people to make these decisions. My point is there's a maximum of 6, right? Isn't there a maximum of 6 in football? Yeah. So that's why it's like, well, I don't want to vote for Will Shields if somebody's going to be off the ballot next year if they don't get it. My point is here, I don't think we have the issue of
we don't have that issue. But my point is that like it was created so that if you don't ever crack the number, you fall off the ballot, and that proves you weren't worthy of it. The process, you should be voting for the best, the people that you think are actually eligible. And if you think there are more than that, then somebody falls out of that threshold. And if they fall below it every year that they're eligible, then they weren't good enough. That's how it works. That is the whole process, is that you should be always voting for the guys that are most deserving, not the ones that are going to fall off next. Right? If you would just vote for the most deserving and somebody, well, he finished 6th, but don't worry, you can get, oh, now wait, 2 new guys came on and they're above him. This guy keeps finishing below.
Well, what I would argue then is
the process is taking care of itself. Then you weren't good enough.
What I would argue is instead of saying vote for the most deserving, just vote for the deserving. Like you shouldn't have to make a decision.
But I'm saying there's a max, but like you said, you thought there were 12 or 13 or 14 guys. You have a max number so that you can't vote for 14 guys because then everybody put everybody in. So you put a max number. And so you would have had to have, in that case, where you said there were 12 guys, have to pick which 6 were the most deserving. And if every time there's one guy that keeps finishing 8th because other guys come on, then he wasn't a Hall of Famer. He didn't meet the criteria. I don't want to argue about that for on and on. That was the idea behind the Hall of Fame and how it's supposed to work. The process takes care of eliminating those who aren't truly great. If they don't top that group, then in their own era, they were never really one of the greats, and they don't make it.
The problem is sometimes a mistake is made, and a guy will fall off a ballot before he should.
It's really not.
Lou Whitaker in baseball is a classic example where he fell off the ballot because
I don't want to talk about the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame anymore because it's a waste.
Well, then let's not talk about the NFL either one. Let's just talk about the Royals Hall of Fame.
I'm just thinking that this is the problem. Is that like that's my thing? Is like people want to slot guys in, and you don't need to do that. I want to bring this up because this comes up, and then we'll wrap here. So where Kottman had this point, he said, because this comes up all the time. Holy hell, I missed the story. Beltran offered to sign an extension. There are a couple of things that I've talked about over the course of doing radio in this town, and I hesitate to say in my career because I think it sounds dumb. I talk on the radio. I don't feel like I had a career. Walter Payton had a career. Right. There are about 4 or 5 things that I have brought up that I think are unbelievable news, and that people like here and a group of people here. And I listen. I recognize that people can't listen to all 20 hours of my radio show every week, but I am stunned. This is one of them. Like when I brought on Jim Harbaugh, and Jim Harbaugh confirmed to me the year I interviewed him because he was winning the 101 awards his rookie year, his first year as the San Francisco 49ers head coach. He won the NFC Coach of the Year. And I interviewed Jim Harbaugh, and on the air, he confirmed to us that, yes, he was taking the Kansas job, but Lou Perkins wouldn't wait for him to get it. And he said, I can't be 2 places at once. And we talked about it, and it was like a big deal. Like a year ago, there was a story in The Athletic that got written, and everybody's like, "Oh, did you see this?" Like he was going to. I'm like, "We did this. Like I did this like years ago." I don't know how many times on the radio I've told the story, and it's not. It's Cotman. I'm not getting on you, but yes, like Carlos Beltran had agreed to a 3-year extension. It was like $27 million or something like
I
that.
think it was 25, and then
they
they
whatever it
wanted back
was,
to make it 24.
and Dan Glass said, "Well, let's see if he'll take 24." And at that point, and by the way, Boris was losing his mind that Beltran was going to take it, but Beltran was going to stay. And then when they said, "We'll see if he'll take $1 million less," and the front office didn't want to go ask him, but they had to because that's what ownership said to do, or at least the president said to do. And then he went like, "All right, screw this. I was going to help you out, but Scott's right. Screw you guys. I'm out. I ain't never signing with you." Yeah, that happened. And I don't know how many times I've told that story. And I don't understand why that is not. I know why it is because
it's too painful a memory. I get it. Nobody wants to remember.
Nobody wants to know.
But it happened. It's been reported multiple sources. Like this was as well sourced of a gossip story as
but when he was traded, I put that on the air. I said, "This is what happened," and it's like nobody bought it. I'm like, I'm not. Am I making this up? Like this is a reality. That and it's not Cotman's fault. I don't understand because nobody else had it. Nobody else would report it and write it. Later, it all started trickling out. But at that time, it was like so frustrating.
Well, I have confidence that when JJ Piccolo negotiates a contract extension with Cole Reagans, John Sherman will not go back and make him slice another $1 million. Let's wrap a bow around this whole thing.
Yeah. All right. So the guy we haven't talked about is Billy Butler. Right? What was your thought on Billy Butler?
He was, a good player, a fan favorite. He wasn't great. If he had stuck around, maybe if he'd been around for
was he your hardest cut?
Emotionally, yeah. But I can't let emotion, run the roost here. So
I check him every year, every time he comes up. But this will be the third time that I voted no on Billy Butler. And the first time it was incredibly hard. And then the second time I go back, like the hardest one the other two really hard ones over time was Kevin Seitzer, voting no on Kevin Seitzer, and voting no on Al Fitzmaurice. And I really feel bad, especially with Fitz passing. I really feel bad that they may have lost votes from me because I really like them as people and I judge them more harshly. Like, you're harder on your own kid if you coach your own kid. Like I love both those guys. They're great guys, great people. And I wonder if I wasn't like just afraid of having to face somebody going, "You're just putting him in because they're your friends." And so those have been the two most painful. I don't know, Billy. I like Billy Butler. I've chatted with him in our hallways at work, and he used to come in on a regular basis with the morning show, and I'd see him and I'd chat with him. And I like Billy. He's an affable guy. He's a good dude. I have nothing negative to say about Billy Butler. There's some interesting and funny stories that come with Billy Butler.
We've
all
heard at least a few.
But those two Fitz and Seitzer were the hardest ones ever. Billy was the toughest one. Like I didn't really have that, but he's the toughest one to say no. He's really, really close. And if he got in, I'd be happy to say congratulations. But but he's gone from 56 to 50%. Unless there's a big backlash this year. And like I said, no one's ever gotten in without being on the first spot. I don't think he's getting in, but it's really hard. He's really, really close. He's up there in a lot of categories. He was the one good hitter on a crappy team for a while. And then finally the team got good. And unfortunately, his body type and his athleticism meant his window was small.
Yeah, and one of the wisest things, I mean, I hate to say this, one of the wisest things the Royals did was let him go.
Yes.
When they did, replaced him with Kendrys Morales. Like if he had the season Kendrys Morales had in 2015 and was on the team when they won the World Series, I think it's a completely different conversation. He's close enough that one more good year in contributing to the World Series winning team, not just the World Series Game 7 team.
If he's on the team in 15, he's in, don't you think? One more year of stats bumps him up a little bit higher in all the categories. He was 1 year away from being in, and he may still get in someday down the road in the veterans.
But I think, look, if we're talking about guys if we're talking about somebody who's going to get in, who didn't get in on the first ballot for the first time, as you're saying, it has to be Carlos Beltran. Like, to me, that's a no-brainer. So, to sum up, we both agree. Carlos Beltran, Alex Gordon, Joakim Soria, Wade Davis. Yes. You want Johnny Damon in, I want Kelvin Herrera in, but 4 out of 5 ain't bad.
No, I would agree. That's a pretty good list, and I don't think either one of them will get in. Do you agree with that?
Not on this ballot, yeah.
Johnny's not. You're going to see. We'll see what Kelvin Herrera gets. We're going to see how much the World Championship means to the Royals.
Right. Well, we'll see from the fans on the fan ballot for sure. I think it wouldn't surprise me if they both get in on the fan ballot, but the fans only have a certain amount of sway in this.
Once we get who does get in, when we get that news, we'll make it a topic here on the Kaufman Corner Podcast. Remember, we're always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete with free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Plus, every project comes with a written warranty. They've been solving parking lot problems in Kansas City for 30 years. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. You can always support the Kaufman Corner Podcast by supporting our great sponsor, Gann Asphalt and Concrete. For the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, my name is Soren Petro, saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Kaufman Corner Podcast.